वेलकम टू टुडेज एडिशन ऑफ मेन स्ट्रीम। आप सब ਨੂੰ ਪਿਆਰ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਤੂਰ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ, ਨਮਸਕਾਰ, ਆਦਾਬ ਐਂਡ ਸ਼ਲੋਮ। We are going to continue from where we left basically last week, last Tuesday, about January 6th and the post-Trump presidency, what happened, Capitol riots and everything. And the investigation by the House of Representatives going on, where only 2 Republicans are on the committee. But before we do that, there is something which I came across and I felt like I should be talking about it. There was in UP actually, and I think right now it is part of Uttarakhand in India. There is a park where the tigers roam free. It is called Jim Corbett Park. It is named after Jim Corbett. His full name was basically Edward James Corbett, born in 1875 in Nainital. And he, after independence, he left to Kenya and he died over there in 1955. Jim Corbett actually was a person who will chase the tigers known as the man-eaters. And I came across a book when I started my college in 1970, and the name of the book was Man-Eaters of Kumaon. I just came across this book by an accident, and I found it interesting from the title, and I read that book, and it left a mark on my mind which is going to stay there for the rest of my life. I still have that book, even though I had to buy a new one when I came to the United States to be a part of my library, just for the heck of it. The fascination about how the tigers, first they become man-eaters, and how it changes their character to become so sophisticated that even in a forest on the dry leaves, they will walk, but you cannot hear them approaching you from your back. The way they will put their foot, that even the dry leaves will not make any noise, which was really amazing. And like they say in Punjabi, wrong te khade kar den wala hisab kitab. So just wanted to share with you that India definitely carries a big history about lot of things, but this is also something which is part of the Indian history, which you should be looking at, because history is being changed. History always changes, but some of the things, they remain static. Only thing is, some of the historical facts come to the foreground only after certain time period is passed. But this was something I just was scrolling through something and came across, and I decided to share with you. So those who have any interest in reading something interesting about, they should get this book by Jim Corbett. It is called Man-Eaters of Kumaon, Kumaon, Kumaon. And those who also keep track of any army units, like in India they have, Gorkha Regiment, they have Sikh Regiment, they also have a Kumaon Regiment. It is called the Gadwal also. So that is something which I wanted to share with you. And also last night it was declared that Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed in Kabul, where he thought that he is not being watched, and it took more than 20 years to find him where he can be eliminated, and the US did eliminate him. For the people who lost their dear ones during 9/11, for them it is a point where it does not return the people you lost, but it at least gives you some sort of mental satisfaction that at least a person who was brain behind this whole thing is eliminated. He's not there anymore. But the difference between him being killed and announcement by the President Joe Biden, and before that, when Osama bin Laden was killed, and at that time President Obama made the announcement, and the announcement made by the previous president Donald Trump, who still refuses to accept the defeat, about the death of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. That shows the difference between the respect for the office, again it's my opinion, and just trying to be a bully. And that's how you present certain things. The more strong you are, the more humble you feel. But it was not the case with the President Trump, the then President Trump. So we are going to talk about that a little bit with the gentleman who was here last time also, and I requested him to be here again so that we can continue the conversation about January 6th, because he is also aware of some of the things which happened when President Nixon resigned out of Watergate. So we're going to talk about that. So first, let's welcome him back again. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Okay. You heard me. Let's hear your opinion about what I just talked about, how the three presidents declared the people who really harmed the Americans about their death.
Mm-hmm.
You heard, how President Obama did, how Joe Biden did, and how Trump did. And you also discussed with me before we started the show that President Trump even could not recognize the name of al-Zawahiri, and that's why he could not give even the order to, eliminate him.
Mm-hmm.
So let me have your opinion first, then we move on.
About which facet of it?
How it differentiates between how Trump put out the death and Joe Biden put out the death of one of the most wanted person.
Well, the way I would organize it is that President Obama and President Biden took a democratic approach, which is to treat terrorism not as an opportunity for war, but as a security issue that needed to be addressed and persist. And I don't think the Republicans, personified by Donald Trump, really care about security other than to say that, trust us, we're in for security, so that they can either, I'm speculating now, that they can either pay off their donors, for, making weapons, or, the fact that they can undermine Democratic politicians by saying that don't trust the Democrats because, their history, they're socialists, they're communists, they were terrorists themselves, Don't listen to them. We are the strong people. And I think to them, that's what the issue is. It's more of a show for them in order to maintain power,
like
and
more,
and not more tactics than policy. A playoff on all hat and no cattle.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really. If you really examine the Republicans, they have no response to anything of substance.
That's a very interesting way of putting out, the way you looked at it. But no, it does definitely, make sense how you are looking at it and your opinion on that. Now the question comes in, because again, it goes down to show how the events of January 6th in 2020 when Joe Biden took over the presidency in 2021, that how this whole thing, when Republicans actually, originally everybody was talking about that this is not right, this is not right, then all of a sudden they all just bought the pro-Trump policies.
I read something today as a comparison, which kind of dovetailed with what I was just saying. It's more partisan, but
politics is always partisan,
I know.
but then there are few things which go beyond a politician.
Well, the Democrats have fought terrorism to enhance democracy, whereas, as typified by January 6th, the Republicans have used terrorism to attack democracy.
Well, yeah, you can, definitely, if we really look at it, then it is a way of moving towards dictatorship from democracy.
Right. Or authoritarianism,
It's same thing.
Yeah,
it's same thing.
Yeah,
Doesn't
but
matter how you
it's
look
all about
at it.
control, and power.
And there also, which I would also like to talk a little bit about it, I think it's North Carolina or South Carolina, which has, one of those gerrymandered districts, and they are in Supreme Court now. If Supreme Court
North
kicks
Carolina.
that can down
Yes.
to the state elected reps,
Right.
then God knows what is going to happen. But right now here, the first trial on January 6th person, he got yesterday actually, one of the judge gave the judgment about 7 years of prison behind the bars.
Right.
Okay.
Renfit or something.
Yeah,
He
Renfit.
was a Texas
Yeah.
man who was part of it. He was an oath keeper. He was
Yeah.
part of a militia.
Yeah. So, can you explain to the viewers exactly what the philosophy is behind the oath keepers?
Philosophy?
Philosophically, whatever I'm trying to make some sense out of it, but maybe you would know better to put it down.
I've never read the manifesto.
I understand
But
that.
we'll
Unless you want to be one of them.
No, but I'll lump in Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, 3%ers, and I'll generalize. They all basically are anti-government, anti-U.S. government, and they feel their reading of the Second Amendment, which says a well-regulated militia has the right to bear arms, and they neglect the rest of the amendment, which says that Congress will establish the militias and also implies that they will distribute the weapons. But they think that they have the power to take it into their hands to become a paramilitary organization with the intent of overthrowing the government to get their point of view across, because they don't like the way electoral politics necessarily work. So if you hear a lot of these politicians that are running today in Arizona and other places, they've been asked directly, will you support the vote? They said, well, it depends on what the outcome is. That's not the way democracy works.
Well,
you either accept the results. You have to accept the results.
Yeah, you have no choice.
I mean, if there are irregularities, then you challenge them.
Yeah,
and unfortunately for the Republicans, most of the irregularities over the last 6 or 10 years have all been Republican.
I was going to talk about that, but let's take a break, and definitely after we come back from the break, we're going to talk about it, because so far during 2020 election, they found one vote, and that was also a Republican who casted his vote for his dead wife, for President Donald Trump. So after that break, we will talk about it. Welcome back to Mainstream. So we're going to continue where we left before the break. Okay, you continue, then I'll follow that.
I was trying to remember exactly where we were.
Well,
about.
let's because we are talking about the January 6th, because what happened, the Watergate, the January 6th, that's another comparison which I want. But before I go there, it is McCarthyism what Donald Trump literally did. And you were talking about labeling the policies of Democrats as socialist, as defunding the police was part of that also, even though it was a very small portion of the people talking about it. But they will never talk about, Republicans will never talk about that, how these oath keepers, 3%ers, and Proud Boys, they were willing to even hang the Vice President Pence because Trump wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are talking about those, the Second Amendment rights, that how this whole political process is dysfunctional, if I may say, to some extent. Even though when President Joe Biden came in, he got a couple of bills passed across the party lines, like infrastructure bill, which was not passed for more than 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
But after last agreement from Joe Manchin, everything is back to where it was before. So going back to, I want you to talk about two things. One, and first and foremost, is the difference and similarities between Watergate, because you were here, I was not, and January 6th.
Okay, and do we get back to the Oath
2020.
Keepers?
Oath Keepers, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they were both very traumatic incidents orchestrated by the president at the time, Nixon and Trump. But Watergate was a lot less complex than January 6th, and a lot of things are trying to be unfolded right now. I mean, I think both Nixon and Trump had the intention of trying to maintain their power. But one of the fundamental differences between the two of them is that Nixon respected
Mm-hmm.
the Constitution and the government, even
Mhm.
though he tried to circumvent
Mhm.
things at time. But when they finally got called on being, things being illegally done, he he realized he had to resign in order to avoid further embarrassment.
Yeah.
And maybe they had already discussed a deal about a pardon, so maybe that was in the back of, I'm sure, I never really gave it a lot of thought, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that those things probably could have been discussed at that point in time. Whereas Trump's, I think, main motivation has been to his own self-preservation, and he'll do anything in order to avoid accountability for what he's done, and to keep trying to make money, and to keep trying to make money, and not to have the spigot of money that he's been siphoning off from the public and the government, and maintaining that, because he has from what I've read, a very tenuous financial situation that he keeps having to, make sure he makes the monthly payments.
No, that is true.
But it's an intricate pot that was structured, that has many, many parts to it, that all coalesces towards the fact that Trump was just trying to maintain power any way he can for his own self-preservation.
What really surprised me out of this whole process was that how far he went and succeeded till the last point. That those people who were, the limousine's driver after he gave the speech, who actually drove him back to the White House instead of taking him to the Capitol. I just think about it that had they not done their job, what could have happened at Capitol Hill? Because they were already in there. The Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, and Proud Boys. And they were fully armed with everything.
Right, and they incited the crowd there to bring them up and to give them more power behind their formations, because you don't need a lot of people tactically to get a crowd moving and to do certain things. And that's what the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were there for. But they had the other marchers there to incite them and get them going, that gave them more of the oomph, so to speak, to wreak havoc the way they did.
The Oath Keepers, they were actually armed to the teeth.
Right.
They were like as if they are going into a mission in a different country to, for example, kill al-Zawahiri or Baghdadi,
Well, their intention was to interrupt the counting of the electoral votes by any means necessary. And I think part of that, which hasn't been, which has only been discussed in certain circles that I'm aware of, but there's no proof yet. But I feel that the intention was put Trump in a position to declare martial law. That's why he wanted to get to the Capitol, to be the conquering hero, so to speak. He wanted to declare martial law, and then they would interrupt the counting of the votes. They would, delay the election, create all sorts of turmoil and that was why, which has been proven, that the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, I think it's mainly they had, a cachet of arms waiting to be brought into Washington, D.C. on Trump's call.
Which they never received.
Yeah, and they were hoping that they could have faked that it was Antifa and Black Lives Matter, whatever other left-wing group. I mean, that's what they thought that they could set up as a pretext to inciting the violence, but none of that happened. So they did the other part, they just continued the other part of it.
What is interesting actually is that Antifa, they use the term Antifa. A lot of people, they have no idea what Antifa is. It is actually just a thought of anti-fascist thought.
Right.
It's not a group. It's not the people who are armed like Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and 3%ers.
Right.
It is just some of those, intellectual elements who think, to some extent, I will not blame them, because if we really look at it, what happened after 2008 meltdown, the rich became more richer. Same thing happened during COVID. Those rich who became more richer, they even became more richer. And in the meantime, the middle and lower middle class, they were going down and down and down financially. So the difference between those and Oath Keepers and 3%ers and
Proud Boys.
The Proud Boys, it's a totally different thing. Here are a group of people, and here is a thought. Which takes me back to which we covered in a long way last time, the freedom of speech. Yes, freedom of speech is very important, but how you check that freedom of speech is freedom of speech until you cross certain line where, especially for politicians, if I personally threaten you, you go to the cops, they will register a case against me that I did threaten Charlie. Okay? They will call me in, maybe they will arrest me, I'll go in front of the judge, either plead guilty or dismiss or misdemeanor or whatever it is. But here, a politician openly declares that he wants somebody's head, and there's no consequence.
Yeah.
So, you growing up in America, tell me if there is a possibility that freedom of speech can be checked somehow, or there is a way, even in the news media, because if you really look at the news media, even news media is no more impartial the way it used to be.
Right. Right. Because of any number of factors of making, making money, tactics that the Republicans have used that have cowed the press so that it becomes, they repeat their talking points. But also, the press primarily loves to portray conflict because that makes it easier to make a presentation. There's drama to it. And, and until people don't respond to that and they need another way of presenting their information that attracts attention, they're going to keep doing it. Because if, everybody's in business, basically.
Yeah, basically that's what it is,
and they're
right?
in business to sell information, so they're going to package it the way that they can sell it.
They can sell it.
So
let's take a small break here, and after that break we will be right back. But if you are sitting, watching, you can call 718-786-5221, and you can ask your questions whenever you need to. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Mainstream. You can dial directly if you want to say something or ask something, or you want us to discuss or further participate in discussion about what we're talking about. Calling us at 844-324-1300 844-324-1300 ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਨੰਬਰ ਤੇ ਕਾਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ. So we are going to go back into where we're talking about. I'll let Charlie. Go ahead.
About just to go back to what we were talking about, when you mentioned Antifa, Black Lives Matter, even though they are separate groups, the perception is that they are part of the Democratic Party, part of the liberal movement of politics here. And
let me add, if I can, or if I may, as liberal armed group with guns and everything. Which is not true. Antifa is not.
Right. I mean, that's the way.
But this is how it is depicted, right?
Or they want to be portrayed as terrorists. Okay, because that's what the Republican Party and conservative thought has been doing for the last 55 years, is labeling anybody on the liberal side of the aisle as being socialist, communist, and terrorism. Okay, so you take Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, 3%ers who are militias and armed, and they call themselves patriots, and yet they want to overturn the government because they're not happy about anything. So the perception of things are off. But my only criticism to other liberals is that I don't necessarily think all of our tactics match up to the strategic goals that we actually have. And part of it is because we are not a coordinated group, which kind of is, I think, back to what Will Rogers
because
said.
Because Antifa is not like, put your hand out and take the oath.
Will Rogers said, I'm not a member of an organized party, I'm a Democrat.
It actually reminds me, which I literally tweeted also, asked the question, when Marjorie Greene Taylor said that the Christians has to claim that Christian patriotic, whatever it was, and my immediate question which I put out was that I'm a Sikh, I'm not a Christian, and I'm a patriotic. I am as much American as anybody claims to be American. So where would she fit me?
We don't fit in.
You being a Jew,
No,
where would you fit in?
That's why I said we don't. There's a preeminent movement right now in the Republican Party, and maybe they're a minority, but you can be very vocal and dominate all the attention, and which is what they're doing, that are Christian nationalists. They have the Republican candidate for governor in Pennsylvania, Mastriano, I think is the way you pronounce his name. He's an outspoken Christian nationalist. He is getting support from Christian nationalists. The Democratic gubernatorial candidate, Mr. Shapiro, who's the Attorney General, he's a Jewish. They're using anti-Semitism to attack. It's very virulent. And where does it stop?
And it was in Pennsylvania where this, I think it was in Pittsburgh, where they went into a synagogue and they killed 16 people praying, right?
Yes. Tree of Life Synagogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they broadcast it live on the channel called Gab, and people loved it. And that's who he hired. He hired the founder of Gab to get his mailing list, I'm sure, and to promote himself on that channel. Mastriano is who I'm talking about. And they are out now saying they only want white Christians to be participating and controlling.
And that is the whole
and
aim.
And if you are not a white Christian nationalist right now, but if you recant and convert, and and pledge your,
your allegiance
to Jesus, then you're okay at that point.
But then again, within Christianity, even if you do that, then you have evangelicals who are trying to kidnap everything. Roe versus Wade actually is evangelical idea, not the Protestant Christian or the regular Catholics. So that's another whole thing, which I just don't want to go into it.
Right, but I'm just saying that it's a political tactic right now that's being used by the Republicans in order to energize factions of the base, because I guess they perceive that if they don't do that, then these people will not come out to vote, and they need every vote they can, because on the other hand, they either energize, to me, their tactics that the Republicans have are energize those factions of their base that are racist or anti-Semitic or anti-Asian, and then to depress the vote on the liberal side, on the Democratic side, to make sure that people feel discouraged and don't come out to vote. So it's twofold.
It is twofold, no doubt about it. Even during the 2016 election, I still remember, when Bernie Sanders did not get the nomination from Democratic side, the people who were supporting him, they decided to sit home. And we are literally reaping, what was sown at that time. That's how Trump actually...
You can go even further. Same thing happened with Ralph Nader running in 2000. He siphoned off enough votes to let Bush win instead of Gore. And do you think any of the course of history would have been the same if Gore had been in place? I don't.
Going back again, McCarthyism, because at that time, it was in the 50s, that this, was he a senator?
Yes, from Wisconsin.
From Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
He just, anybody who will not agree with him, he will say that he's a communist, and immediately that person will be shunned and put up behind the bars, and same thing is, at least they try to duplicate or replicate the same thing with Trump. Because one of Trump's advisor in 80s was one of the attorney who was McCarthy's right-hand man.
Right. He was also worked for McCarthy. Roy Cohn. Yeah.
Yeah, Roy Cohn.
Yeah.
Right? So, again, it comes down to, for me, I'm insider, but I'm also outsider insider. I look at America as of today as compared to 83, 84 when I came here. In 84, when Reagan won and he started doing this, throwing up this thought of giving the money to the rich, that they will invest in economy and this and that, and immediately I was like, no, this is going to ruin America. So we are even worse position today than we were in 83, 84.
We are in the position today as a net result of what they started doing with Reagan. And Reagan is a result of all the work that they were doing from the time Franklin Roosevelt was in office and doing the New Deal. There are elements of the Republican Party that have never wanted to see any kind of social program or social assistance to people in general. And I would attribute it to saying that they want to maintain all their wealth, or that they felt, other current contemporary politicians would attribute it to other things, but I think contemporary Republican politicians are the residue of the intellectual firepower that existed 40 years ago, and they don't really understand the intellectual underpinnings of what they're saying, and that you just have, just the anger and the resentment that have developed, that has been cultivated, kind of bred, they bred out the intellectualism of, 40 years ago, and wanted to maintain the anger and resentment in the current crop of Republican politicians, and they're distilling it even more right now.
My question also is, people do hear these, names like Carnegie Hall organization, right?
Tammany Hall?
Carnegie Hall.
Oh, Carnegie Hall, yeah.
Right? It's a Republican-leaning organization, right? But people don't know about it. They assume that, okay, it's a non-profit organization and it is for the benefit of everybody.
Right, and we've talked about this. I think the underpinnings of that is this memo by
yeah, you have it.
Yeah, Lewis Powell. Sorry, I had to look at my notes
that's
for that.
Okay. Yeah.
Lewis Powell, who became a Supreme Court justice, and he wrote a memo to the Chamber of Commerce, basically laying out the whole game plan that the Republicans are following. Of course, there was a concern by conservative thinkers at that time that the fabric of the United States was falling apart, and that the essence of free enterprise was being attacked. And granted, there were elements of that, but his blueprint for doing that was to attack colleges, promote think tanks, and educated, and trying to create people who were authorities on various topics that would be that the newspapers and TV would use as their way of promoting this certain line of thought, and that they consciously went about making changes to our society back in the early 70s, and they've been continuing that playbook ever since.
Well, we are going to go for a break, and after the break we'll be right back. We will continue on this point, because for me it is also very interesting, because if the Republicans have their agenda, what about Democrats? Right after the break. Welcome back to Main Street with Harpreet Toor. Before we wrap up today's program, I'm going to talk about two things with Charlie. One, of course, is about if Republicans have been planning this, which I also read before somewhere, What about Democrats? Have they been sleeping on the wheels?
Um,
Or why they don't have anything like that where they can also start, providing the rights, even though I know they try to do it, but every time they try to do it, it becomes such a big issue that during Trump's presidency, and same thing during Bush's presidency, I saw all Republicans, they will fall in line. The people who, were deadly against Trump, including Senator Lindsey Graham, who literally called him insane. He started sitting down when Trump will tell him, sit down, stand up, and Trump will ask him to stand up. So why, when it comes down to Democrats, I don't want them to be exactly like, the sheeps, but at least have some sense. Why not?
No, I mean it's a profound question, and I'm trying to sort it out because I've thought about this. One is that the Republicans have been defining Democrats for the last 50 years, and sorry.
No, that's okay. It doesn't bother me.
If
it bothers you, I don't know. But
so they've been defining Democrats for 50 years, and a lot of it has been internalized by the Democrats. So that in a sense, right now we see people with sort of a Chicken Little complex. They think the sky is going to fall. Any bad thing the sky will fall. Okay, and one part of how we
so
got
Democrats are playing, instead of being offensive, playing defensive.
They have
all
been,
the time.
They've been that's been the case for 50 years, and more than 50 years. And let me go on further. Also, part of the plan that Lewis Powell had was to monitor press and TV and to critique it constantly. And he talks about being fair and balanced. Okay. And what was that? That was Fox. So this is a precursor to the Fox. I'm pointing to the memo.
Yeah.
It's a precursor to what Fox TV is. Okay, so
even though now, as of today, when we are talking, we don't know about tomorrow, Fox has technically dumped Trump.
But it doesn't matter. It's all the same. I mean, they're just changing.
No, I know.
They're just changing chairs on the Titanic.
They just changed the,
right. I mean, because then you have the press, which was being attacked 50 years ago as being liberal, and in the pocket of the Democrats, I feel kind of had to prove their bona fides by being, balanced and not favoring one side or the other, which kind of has created the both sides reporting, and which is more of stenography. Mm-hmm. And basically, if you look and see what goes on now, is that the press repeats the Republican talking points, and then they ask the Democrats to respond to Republican talking points. And if people are only catching a headline, they're seeing the same Republican talking point.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I want your opinion on Liz Cheney, and Kissinger. What's his name?
Kinzinger.
Yeah. And also, Henry Kissinger came out with a book recently, which definitely we will talk next time when you're on the show. I want to get your thoughts on those.
Okay.
At least those two House members.
Kissinger.
Kissinger, Henry Kissinger, we can leave out.
Kinzinger.
Kinzinger and Liz Cheney.
Okay.
Both are Republicans. Kinzinger is not running, and Liz is going to lose in primary.
Probably.
But still,
maybe, but we'll see.
Still, we will see. Yeah.
Okay. I tend to think of certain situations adapting to a military theory, that tactics should support a strategy. And right now, one of the strategic goals is to deal with the January 6th. And you need any allies that you can when you're approaching a situation. And from my democratic point of view is Liz Cheney and Kinzinger, excuse me,
Yeah.
Are allies for the moment. They're not long-term allies, but they're allies in this situation.
They are looking at United States as a patriot towards the country than otherwise. You have 15 seconds to answer
They
that.
are hoping to reform the Republican Party. And if the Republican Party gets defeated, they want to be in a position to resurrect the Republican Party the way they think it should be.
Well, that is exactly, were my thoughts, that even if in this primary Kinzinger is not running, Liz Cheney, even if she loses this time, I'm pretty sure that she definitely will come back, because don't forget, her dad, Vice President Cheney, even though he shot somebody with the expired gun license, but he still walked away free without any charges. So till next time, good night and good luck.